What's going on, guys? Welcome back to your Lake Fork Guide. I've got my man Jake Norman here. This is the man that's going to answer all your fishing questions.
All of them.
Every one of them. There will be no more mystery. He is going to talk about tracking fish, where do fish travel, how do they travel throughout the year. We're also going to talk to him about how many fish are in our area lakes. This is our area biologist. If you want to learn more about the fisheries in East Texas, you're going to want to watch this. Well, Jake, man, can't thank you enough.
Likewise, I'm glad to be out here today.
Appreciate you joining us today and helping us learn some more about these great fisheries in East Texas, man. It's we're so fortunate. I know you well know this. For those that don't know, Jake Norman is our area biologist, and he takes care of Lake Fork as well as today we're on Lake Athens. This is right by your office, is right over that hill.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's no, I'm lucky. I've got 15 counties total.
Okay.
That I cover all the public water bodies in, so many good waters: Palestine, Tawakoni, Richland, Chambers, Cedar Creek.
Yeah.
It's amazing to have this many good waters in my district.
It is. It's kind of the mecca of bass fishing, especially over the last 5 years or so. It really got a lot of attention with all the big tournament trails and all that. And you do a lot of different things. And so today what I want to do, me and Jake are actually just going to go out here on Lake Athens. Great fishing lake. You've seen us on it recently. We're going to go try to catch a few fish and have fun, because I know you like to fish.
Absolutely.
That's
what got me here.
Yeah, you love to lean on them too, just like the rest of us. So we're going to go out here, try to catch a few on Lake Athens. I don't know if we're here too late for the topwater deal, but it'd be cool if we catch some on topwater, probably catch some on a chatterbait, maybe some plastics. I don't know. We're going to catch a few fish, but while we're fishing, me and Jake are going to have some in-depth discussions about what goes on under the surface in these water bodies. What's going on, guys? Billy Lawson from your Lake Fork Guide. I want to tell you about a new product we got today. As you see behind me, Lake Fork is super low. It's tough to navigate. What I want to do is allow you guys the ability to learn how to navigate this lake just like a pro. Let me introduce you to the Your Lake Fork Guide Pro Lanes. It's a boat lanes chip. There's many out there. I feel like we've put more time and effort and information on this one. You're going to have lanes in every corner of this lake. You're going to have more hazard waypoints that tell you whenever underwater obstructions get close to these marked lanes that we have. We have variable running depths available on these lanes. We have lanes marked that are good at 6 foot low and higher on the pool elevation of the lake. We also have lanes that are marked good at 3 foot low and higher. Once we reach 3 foot low and higher, guys, you'll be able to run to almost any corner of this lake using the Your Lake Fork Guide Pro Lanes. As you'll see behind me, you can see the underwater obstructions. You see that patch of timber right there? Obviously, you wouldn't want to run through that. But if you pick this lane right over here, man, you can fly right through that, no problem. And that's exactly what we've done while the lake is low. Is go out and mark all the usable areas and ways to navigate into them in the gaps between the timber that's under the water through the entire lake of Lake Fork. So go check them out at yourlakeforkguide.com. You can order them there online. You can also buy them in person at the tackle store at Lake Fork Marina, and go get yourself some Your Lake Fork Guide Pro Lanes and navigate Lake Fork just like a pro. He didn't even make a splash. Yeah. Came up there and licked it. That's all he did. Got up there and got to sniffing it, Jake. Got it 8 though. Look at him.
Down, yeah.
Look at the other one with him. Try to see if the other one will show. I think he's gone. He's gone, so we can bring this dude in here, and boy, did he eat that topwater. He may have not made much ripple, but my goodness, look at that. That's pretty cool, ain't it? That's not the look at this. It's a 2-pounder, Jake.
Oh yeah.
It's a 2-pounder. You see the look on my face though?
Topwater especially.
Man, it just doesn't get old, brother. It's so awesome. Golly, he's got that thing choked. Let's get this fish unbuttoned here. Well, there we go, folks. Got our day started. Just a pretty little Athens fish. Jake, that one's doing good. He looks like he's in great shape. Yeah. Really healthy, good color. I don't know if that means anything to a biologist, but I like looking at them when they look pretty like that.
Oh, I definitely like looking at them. Overall color mostly is just a product of the water they're around. But
yeah.
There's obvious if he's not looking fungused up, which you do start to see happen on fish this time of year when they're struggling. So yeah. There's some other indicators like that can tell you if a fish is healthy or not. Well,
Jake, one of the cool things that you guys do that I know you've been doing here recently from you telling me you have is the shocking surveys, where you guys go out and get that electric boat. If you ever see a boat on the water, folks, and it's got things that look like big giant rods sticking off it like this, and they're just kind of idling through the water. That's my man.
Yep.
And he's shocking the fish, and it stuns them, and they float up, and that's the way you guys get a survey of population in the lake, right?
Yeah, especially we use it for our bass populations, and also then we can look at our forest base really well, so our shads,
there you go.
all of our sunfish, everything. That's the primary purpose of electrofishing around here. Both.
You know, we've talked about it. You don't get just a whole complete picture from that because there's, you know, it can't go super deep.
Nope.
And if there's a whole bunch of vegetation up shallow, it kind of limits your abilities to do at the end. And so you don't get just the most complete picture, but you get a better picture than just about anything else on population. And what I'm curious about is, you know, of the common knowledge that exists for most of us out there, what are the things that you think are misconceptions or things that maybe most of us don't understand about our populations in these water bodies?
I think the biggest thing is probably how people think populations abruptly change. And honestly, that doesn't happen very often unless you have a true fish kill. I don't know how often we get phone calls from anglers or homeowners to say, we need to stock more fish. You know, our population is
no, bro, you need to learn how to fish better.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and
can't say that, but yeah.
And a lot of times, and even a lot of times, even it shows you that it doesn't matter how good of it.
Those were turtles slapping up.
Yeah.
We've heard splashes, folks, and we're both fishermen first. And squirrel.
But turtle, lost my train of thought there.
Yeah, we were talking about, you know, people calling, thinking that fish populations change.
Everyone just instantly thinks that, or from one year to the next, they're like, it's just not as good as it used to be. And our electrofishing, one thing about it, even if we're not getting all the fish, it's the most consistent method we have, so it really gives us such a good snapshot of the population year over year.
Well, if there's, you know, you can only reach certain parts of the water column with it, but if there's
8 feet typically is about the most.
Right, and if there's X amount in this part of the water column this year and X amount in this part of the water column next year, you get a clear picture of the overall population. Yeah,
exactly. So it helps us track trends over time, and most people think populations are a lot more fragile than they are. That in 1 year's time frame, it can go from the best lake in the country to the lake void of fish.
Well, that's been a topic of conversation with fishing guides on Fork for years. You know, they thought, I'm sure you've heard from some of them guys on Fork that'll tell you, well, Fork just, it ain't what it is. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past, and you know what, you're right, it's not what it was in 92.
No. When
it was at its all-time peak. It's not what it was, but population-wise, how is it compared to, say, 2017, 16, 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, 5-6 years ago to now, it's about exactly the same, truthfully.
The population is?
Yeah, total numbers. If anything, I'd say we have a little bit better abundance of 4+ pound fish right now.
There you go.
I really like them.
Which makes sense because we've had good spawns with full lakes from 15 to now until this year. Yeah.
So really, it's especially 17, 18 on to now, our electrofishing data has been very stable.
Very stable.
Has not fluctuated. Now,
well,
is it, like you said, is it different than probably what it looked like in the 90s or
absolutely.
2000s even? Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
well, what's funny is, you know, when I was first moved, I moved here in 2009, and the first 5 years I was here, and even when I first started guiding in 2015, and even a little bit before that, I would hear guys say then that it wasn't, and even through 16, 17, 18, they would say, man, it's, you know, it wasn't that long, just a few years ago, we sure were catching them better. And I was looking at them in 16, 17, and 18 going, golly, if y'all catching them better than this. Because, like, those were some good years. The fishing, you know, we were talking about that earlier today, and the fishing was really good during those years. And now here we are in 2022, now the lake's low, and it's just another reason people are, man, the population's just not the same. And the truth is, the reality is it actually is.
Yeah.
It's very much the same.
And another thing,
the fish are behaving differently with different lake conditions, all that, but population's the same.
Is stable. And something else we kind of talked about on those lines that even we can kind of track with electrofishing is how certain parts of the lake may have a really good population of fish for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't necessarily mean a new population as those fish age. And
right. Pinson goes off for 2 or 3 years, then Dale Creek goes off for
absolutely. And we can see that even with our electrofishing data. You know, we pick, it's randomly generated points most of the time. We don't just go out there and say, all right, I'm gonna shock areas where I know there's fish. It has to be randomly selected. But even with that,
wait, you mean I can't send you a list of creeks I want you to go electrofish for me?
No, you know, if we have time, we can do some fun shopping.
Okay, well, I'll send you the bill for the guide trip afterwards then.
There we go. Yeah, you take IOUs, right?
Yeah, I thought we were doing a trade thing here, man.
But Yeah, so even with that, we do enough sites that we cover the entire lake, and you can really see certain parts of the lake where our sites are a couple years produce a ton of fish, and then suddenly it's not necessarily a dead zone, but you're not seeing nearly as many there. But other parts of the lake kind of replace that, and it goes through cycles. And I think that's part of the challenge too with staying on top of fish there, is that even you might have a creek, a section of the lake that's really hot and consistent, reliable for a few years, and suddenly
they always
really change.
You catch them 2 or 3 years in a row, and you're like, man, they always come here. Then you pull up on that point the 4th year, and they're not there.
And again, that sometimes leads people to believe,
frustrating.
Population.
Yeah.
It's not the case.
Okay, well that's good news, and that's something that I've had some discussions with people about, and I know the general consensus for people a lot of times when they struggle, they think it's the population, and the reality is sometimes we just ain't on the fish as good as we used to be, and we need to get a little better and go try some new things and kind of quit fishing history probably more than anything else. So that's good to hear and good to know.
So this lake would be a prime example of that right now, on a tough fishing day. I guarantee you we could dump all Sparky in here right now, and we'd show some really, really quality fish.
The Sparky is the name for y'all's electro boat. Gotcha. Well, another thing that you guys have done from a study standpoint that I know you're kind of been doing the wrap up on the data analysis part of it, I guess you would say, is what you call your telemetry study.
Yes.
Is that right? Telemetry? And for the rest of us that just fish and, like I ain't no math major, I ain't no science major, dog, I just go fishing. What that means is they put radio tracking devices, little signal devices in fish, and they followed them around for a year, is what they did. And Jake did that on a number of fish on Lake Fork, and got to study their travel habits. So let's just go into the misconceptions of fish's travel habits. Now, and we don't listen. Don't get too scientific on us. This is a simple audience here.
I'm fishing today. I'll keep it simple.
But just as a general fishing perspective, what is the information that you think from a fishing perspective we need to know that we may be misconceived on when it comes to the travel habits of bass?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest take-homes, we've talked about this a few times, is how the bulk of our fish are not moving very much. And we saw that, we had 2 different batches of fish, 1 year each for each of those, so we followed them, had a lot of data to look at, and a lot of these fish were staying within, say, 100 yards or so throughout the entire year, spring, summer,
if you originally
fall, winter.
found him on that dock, he doesn't really leave the mouth of this cove ever.
Absolutely.
And
And kind of with that, our second batch, we went and caught a few deep fish just to see if they behave differently. What people would expect to see, really true nomadic,
that's
what they would do.
Probably the standard operating knowledge would be that offshore fish are more nomadic. I think most people would say that.
And I think the most interesting part of that is, we collected most of these fish off of what a lot of folks call public humps, or
that ridge that runs out there, Heartbreak Ridge. So
we caught a lot of them there. It's a place that's well known, gets deep by anglers day in, day out. And we collected them in June, and for a month or so, they stayed there. And we go out and track them. Most of the time, they'd be sitting right under people's boats, or people would be fishing a school that they were in. They stayed there. Didn't matter the time of day. Just they were there. But by about mid-July, they completely vacated it. They left. But it wasn't. They just became nomadic and started suspending and roaming. And they went to a different spot, and they stayed there for the rest of the year. Some of them were bridge ends. Some of them they pulled up under docks.
So if you know that area on Heartbreak Ridge, basically, maybe 500 to 1,000 yards away, there's a bridge?
Yep, there was one that sat on the end of that. He moved from
the ridge to the bridge.
Of the dock, or the home corner of the bridge. And it stayed there until we couldn't find it anymore.
These old ridge bridge fish.
Yeah, exactly.
You just ridge to bridge, baby. That's all we do.
Those closest docks, we had a few other fish that pulled back, and they're always up under those docks, or they'd occasionally be out in front of the timber in front of the dock, but still talking, they were keeping a 50-yard home range or less after there was just that early summer pattern where they're out on that ridge, and then they just left it.
How about that? That's interesting.
So that surprised me. Even if anything, I wasn't surprised that they left, but I fully expected them to be true nomadic, all over the place.
Right. To move 2 or 3 points down the lake,
or just suspended out in the timber off of it, and then occasionally find them on the ridge, sometimes out. But they didn't do that at all. They left it completely and set up shop on.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was a surprise.
And that kind of goes back to establishing what you're talking about with shocking. Certain areas having populations for periods of time. if you think about it, if you've got an area that's densely populated and those fish aren't really moving as much as we think they are, well, then that area is going to hold fish for years.
Yep.
And then eventually those fish maybe change their pattern, some of them die off, whatever happens, and then a different area of the lake that's had a new crop of fish grow in that area and establish that as their home. Now that's the populated area, right? So that all kind of ties in together, right? It's interesting.
Now, you know, if you look back again to what I want to call the glory days, the heydays of pork, without a doubt the population was higher than we had habitat around the whole lake. So the whole lake really had consistent spawning success, had a much more dense population everywhere. When we have more variable habitat and a little more inconsistent spawns, the fish that do make it grow giant there and grow quick, and that's part of what still makes that lake special.
Growth rate's just off the charts compared to most water bodies.
Growth rates are phenomenal, and again, the slot we have on that lake really helps just protect so many great quality fish. But we don't, so we're not having just a lake-wide explosion of fish every year. You kind of just get certain areas that cycle for a few years.
Squirrel. Any splash in the water, we're gonna have to pause this conversation, folks at home. Let's move on to a little bit different topic, and we kind of touched on this first. It's funny that folks didn't get to see this on the video, but we pulled into an area, and I'd come out here a couple weeks ago, and one day that I filmed, and then a couple days after that with customers, I'd come out here, and I'd kind of dialed in after those few days out here. This one little area had some great topwater fish early in the morning. We pulled in there, and they were doing construction on a dock.
Yeah.
They were banging.
They were making a lot of noise.
You know, nail gun noises. I mean, they were making a lot of noise on this dock. And one of the things you guys studied in your telemetry study was the boat noise and boat pressure and big motor noise and how it makes those fish move. Like if they're set up on a tree, how close can you get to them before they leave?
All of that.
All that kind of stuff you guys studied. And what's funny is I asked you this morning, I said, hey, I said, man, I said, you think, this guy said, I've been having topwater fish right in here in this little area around this dock. I said, and it's just a grass flat in there, so you don't have to fish the dock itself. But like the dock was up there where that oak tree is that going to affect these fish in this area? And you said, you know, before I did this study, I'd have told you, no, that would be fine. But since I've done that study, I think that maybe, yeah, it will affect it. And sure enough, we didn't get any bites in that little stretch. We got one little bite around the corner from it a ways down.
Yep.
But that was all we got on the topwater deal this morning, and then we had to move on. So talk to me about the effect of our noise that we make in our boats and just pressure and all that, and how it affects them.
Yeah, and that was another, I would say, eye-opening part of that study. You know, looking at just the presence of boats probably being the biggest, and how quickly that would alert fish that you were there. And
they're aware of your boat, like
a lot more than people realize. And
if there's a fish on that bank, we may still bite, he may still catch, we may still catch him, but he knows we're here.
Yep, and that old adage saying whatever, that lakes that have so much pressure, they just get accustomed to those sounds. They get accustomed to outboard boards, control motors, and sonar pings, and they it doesn't bother them. Well, that's not really the case. What we saw, just a little under half of all the fish we tracked, and every time we located them, would, if they didn't completely flee, they would at least clearly get alerted and move.
Yeah.
Our boat getting, you know, within casting distance of them.
Okay.
And like I've always said, you look at it, that's no different than spooking a fish on a bed. You know how much more difficult they are to catch once you've spooked them or got them really alerted. And it kind of just makes you realize fish kind of act like they do on the beds almost year round, especially if they're sitting on a piece of cover. They're not just reactive like that when they're up on a bed. That is year round. They can spook, they'll move off, they'll push back away from you.
You know, we
don't like what's near them.
We hear more of the upper, you know, the highest level guys talking about it now with the advent of live sonar coming around the way it has. We hear guys talking about being able to see them from further away on live sonar matters, longer casts, things like this. Turning the sonar off when you get around them, right? Like that's something like, okay, I found them over here, now let's turn it off to be quieter. Like now that live sonar, and I think now that we've been able to observe fish's underwater behavior more when they're not just on a bed. I think before the misconception might have been we just thought that, well, they just behave that way when on a bed because they're shallow. Yeah. No, they behave that way in 10 foot of water as well. And it wasn't until the last couple of years that we could see them behave that way with live sonar. Absolutely. And so now it's come to a time where, you know, to break it down to the simplest terms, what do we need to know? Fish live in a home area. They're very conscious of your boat and noise that you're making.
Yep.
And what that tells me is I need to be conscious of my boat and the noise that I'm making and how far away I am from my targeted area, and the length of cast that I can make matters a lot more than I ever thought it did.
Big time.
How far, like longer casts are so much more important than we've ever realized, I think.
Yep. You want to get hit. You know, along those same lines, talking about the dock this morning, same thing I told you today. One of the first fish we tracked that turned out to be just a crazy tight home range on 2 or 3 boat docks right next to each other through the entire.
Yeah, I remember that one. I remember that one.
One of the first times we tracked him, there was somebody pressure washing the dock that he had been using. And that was the only time he was out about 100, 200 yards off the dock, just out in no man's land, not even near timber or anything, just sitting out there.
Yeah.
While they were in there making all that noise on the pressure washing that dock. Every other time for the whole year we found him on that dock. And that just tells you again, it's not just motor noise, bait presence, it's just noises that are not, say, normal to them.
Yeah.
They're it aggravates, but nothing else.
Stresses their environment, kind of like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Stress in their environment, not natural. It really tells me as anglers we need to be more like hunters.
Yeah.
Be more stealthy. Leave it the way you found it. Be more, aware of your presence on the water, because the less that you disrupt what's naturally happening, the better chance you have for those fish to feel comfortable enough to behave the way they normally behave. And the reality with a bass is, the way he normally behaves is he eats everything he has an opportunity to eat.
That's right.
Everything that he has an easy opportunity to eat, he will eat. I mean, listen, guys, think about what we're doing. This is plastic and metal. And fish will eat something plastic and something metal every day of their life, or we wouldn't be doing what we do.
Absolutely.
And so, if the more comfortable you make a bass, the more you get him close to his natural behavior, he's going to eat whatever you put around him if he's completely feeling comfortable
He's
and natural.
acting normal.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
completely true. And that's just another thing I think that hopefully comes out of the study and helps people maybe have a little more success consistently.
Well, and that's the deal, man. We kind of touched on this a little bit in the opening segment there, but like, I can't stress to the public enough how much I've been impressed with how much you guys care about the fisheries, and how much you want all of us to go out. Like, you want the fisheries to be great. Number one, because it's your job, but number two, because like, you want to go out and catch them. You're here to help make the fisheries better for all of us, because you want to partake in that as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's not just selfish reasons. Obviously, I want them to be best, but for one, that's the number one goal of my job is angler success, happy anglers, everything else, and not to mention if they're happy, it all makes my job a lot easier.
Yeah, you don't have to fill near as many complaint emails.
So everything about it, I want nothing but angler success, happy anglers, improved catch rates. Oh, he missed it.
Oh, did you see that? He blew up on that buzzbait, didn't he? Golly, I'm gonna bird dog you real quick. And I missed the cast. Oh no. Don't make me put that Cinco in there on him. Please don't make me resort to that. Now I'm hung up in a lily pad. Boy, I'll tell you what, I don't know about all this talking and fishing stuff. I don't feel like,
how people do it.
don't feel like I'm nearly as good. Well, Jake, I guess, we couldn't do this video and talk to a biologist for our fisheries without addressing the most hot button topic of all times with Texas Parks and Wildlife in our fisheries, and that is vegetation growth. I mean, it is such a divisive issue, and there's so much. You talk about misconception now. Since I've gotten, and I've always thought there was quite a bit of exaggeration and misconception on the angler's part, but since I've gotten to know you guys, the amount and the extreme, like how far the misconception has been carried is pretty unbelievable, honestly. First things first, just so everybody knows, Jake, you can make whatever comment you want on this,
sure,
but you guys are not out to eliminate vegetation from lakes in any situation that is not your goal.
No, the exact opposite. I mean, in fact, there's been attempts for a long time, granted, not many have been too successful, to grow more vegetation, to reestablish more vegetation in the lakes. It's really the golden ticket to consistent spawning success, healthy populations, more abundant populations. There's not a biologist in the state that would tell you otherwise, that vegetation especially, in that, say, 10 to 40% coverage of a whole lake.
Now,
There's nothing but benefit.
to clear things up, has this always been the thought process of the people in charge of this department? Or was there a time, even 20, 30, 40 years ago, where there was biologists that wanted to eliminate vegetation? And there was programs that wanted to eliminate it?
Yeah. In the big picture, no. But I'll kind of elaborate. I think the mindset has changed over time. People used to believe more that it had to be a native species, or there wasn't a benefit.
So there was a time when hydrilla was thought that we need to get rid of hydrilla.
Regardless, no matter what, if there was hydrilla, it was bad for the water body. Yes,
but now
there's a lot more people that are accepting, acknowledging, seeing, however you want to look at it, that
the benefits of
that hydrilla can be beneficial habitat. It can be problematic. I mean, I won't deny that. There's cases it can become overabundant. It can be 50% plus coverage. It can truly choke off a reservoir. But our large reservoirs, say Fort, Rayburn, Toledo, it doesn't matter.
Or even Cypress Spring, Bob Sandlin.
Yep.
What's the Richland Chambers, Cedar Creek?
All of them.
You're not going to get too much hydrilla in those.
It's not going to cause a biological problem. It just won't. Now, it might cause access issues for homeowners, but we've got a much more dialed-in approach now, when it's done correctly, to give them, give them a little bit of an olive branch, let them
some relief.
And most of the time, it's on their dime on top of that. We're not paying for it, and we're not doing it.
So let's talk about that, because we're here on a lake where that is an issue, right? Because you've got...
Example.
On Lake Athens, there's an abundance of vegetation. I mean, pretty much the entire lake's lined with vegetation for the most part, up 10 foot and in or 8 foot and in, whatever. And there is a lot of homes on this lake. Almost the entire lake is lined with homes as well. And most of these homes on this lake are not fishermen.
Yeah, I would say.
They are upper echelon Dallas second home type people, or retirees. A lot of pleasure boats, a lot of skiing boats, a lot of cruising boats, jet skis.
They like it for the beauty of the lake. They don't see vegetation.
They want to get out on the water, spend a day on the water with their family.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with people doing that. That's part of our resource, needs to be there for those people as well.
For sure.
Unfortunately, for all of us that just want to fish. But it is part of the equation.
Yeah, it is, without a doubt. Like you said, it's part of it. And truthfully, this lake is what I would say about the best example we could come up with, where I've mentioned, there's always two sides. There's anglers and there's homeowners, or in most situations.
And anglers don't want you to kill any grass, even when it does become problematic.
And most homeowners want it completely gone.
They want it completely gone.
It's impossible to have, if you have a case where one of those two sides is completely happy or completely ticked off, you're probably not doing things completely correct.
So what happens when you have a lake like Athens, or Tyler's been one in the past, it's been a hot topic, and you've got homeowners that want vegetation gone, especially around their property and their dock? Mm-hmm. How does that process work? What takes place?
Yeah, so really statewide, granted, it's tough to, let's say, execute on all lakes. This lake does perfectly. That there's a permit that any individual has to put out,
apply for,
complete and submit it, and I review it, and I have to approve it before even mechanical treatments. It doesn't just have to be herbicide, but for any removal of habitat in a public water.
So even for them to go in there and rake the grass out of the lake by hand, they can't do that?
Nope, there's a permit that has to be approved.
Okay. And as the biologist, you're the one that decides that?
Absolutely. So it's whatever the district biologist is for that given water body, it goes through them. They have to approve it. So on this lake, we actually formed a committee back in 2017, I believe, with anglers and homeowners, and kind of put a few things together. Sorry, I got distracted again there.
It's all right.
And kind of came to a place where, say, anglers didn't get completely what they wanted, but neither did the homeowners, and came up with a treatment approach that allows homeowners to treat around their dock, but in a controlled footprint and limited to X amount of size. And it also has to, again, it's on their dime. And
that boy's acting like this is a Bassmaster Classic, but a little more important, isn't he?
Is that old field?
Yeah, I think it is, Randy. He likes driving that bullet fast. I know he does. Old Randy out here doing his thing.
But anyway, so it's kind of given homeowners at least the ability to keep around their dock clean so they can get their boat out or swim or whatever they want. But we're not coming in and treating large stretches of bank at once, protecting most of the vegetation still. Obviously, this lake still has plenty of it in it.
Listen, major squirrel here, but you just scared the ever-loving crap out of a turtle with that buzzbait. Yeah. That turtle popped his head up and you went right off his hind end and he had a heart attack, dude. So they apply for this permit, and Jake here decides, okay, this is an area where this person has a legitimate complaint. We can treat some grass. How does the next step work? What is it that you're approving? How much do they get to?
Yeah, so on this lake, and it's kind of, I've made it fluid, or it varies year to year on what size of footprint they can treat based on our survey results from the summer before. If we see vegetation total abundance declining, I've restricted their footprint some to try and
that was something that happened the last couple of years where the vegetation was declining. Yep. Right? And then you restricted.
So we restricted down to a 75 by 75 foot area total. So it's about 0.13 acres is the most they could treat.
So they can only treat 75 foot by 75 foot around their dock, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's really restrictive.
Yeah, and it is. And
what are they using to treat it? How does it get treated?
It depends on the species and the herbicides, but in this lake as well, we require it all to be done through certified applicators. So professionals that's all they do is they get paid to treat and manage vegetation and habitat and water bodies. So there's some folks that still do mechanical approaches. A lot of it is through herbicide, but it's done through again a licensed applicator that does this for a living and is really good at what they're doing, so they can keep the area controlled. We're not treating outside that footprint.
Well, good.
And again, when I restricted the footprint this year, I've ruffled a few feathers of some homeowners that, of course, are a little upset. And I've talked to them and told them most likely the vegetation has rebounded this year, and there's a chance I allow them to treat a little bit more again next year. It's going to be a yearly process where you look at the vegetation on the lake in the summer and decide if we need to.
It's almost a situation where you're never going to be right. Like you as the deciding guy, you're going to have somebody think you're wrong.
Exactly.
And what's important to me, and what's important I think for all the anglers out there to understand, is that employees of the state like Jake here are doing everything they can to service the community, and that doesn't just always include us bass fishermen. That includes these people too, and they do have a right to use the water resource, and they have a right to have their voice heard and all that good stuff. And at the end of the day, you're making the best decision you can, and you have a lot more education on the science factors of the grass and the chemicals and all that. And we're taking the time and the effort to try and do what's best for the fishery and best for everybody involved. And there's probably always going to be the animosity between recreational lake homeowners and bass fishing guys. That's always going to be two.
The sooner you accept or acknowledge that will always be the case. I think the sooner you try to put together something like we have here and find ways to at least keep both sides a little bit upset or a little bit happy, as opposed to full one way or the other, because it prevents anything stupid from happening. Something unexpected, somebody going rogue and doing something you don't want. It keeps the best balance of everything in, and it's keeping our vegetation in decent abundance here.
So let's just say this on the grass deal one more time for the record. Texas Parks and Wildlife and their biologists are not in any way attempting to eliminate vegetation from any of our fisheries.
Correct.
That's not happening.
Let's throw one caveat. Giant salvinia, water. So there's, that's vegetation technically. So there's a few cases.
Okay, giant salvinia is, yes. But let's talk about that, because the way you guys treat that is different too. It pops up in an area of a lake. It's not like you go, we got to kill every piece of grass in the lake.
No,
that's not what y'all do.
No, like Athens, it's had it behind the bridge. We focused just our efforts there. Everything out here is not ever going to be sprayed.
Yeah, you've used floating booms to try and restrict the flow where giant salvinia could drift down the lake. You've tried to restrict that, and you've done it successfully. Yep. And then you've spot treated the areas in which you have found
salvinia is there.
Salvinia. And I've gone out on a hyacinth survey with you guys on Lake Fork, and we were literally at times picking up pieces by hand and crushing them in the floor of the aluminum boat you guys use.
Yeah, versus having to put
and then if we couldn't get to it or it was too much to gather by hand right away, y'all would then schedule a spot treatment. Y'all have since had that spot treatment, and it made, now we don't have vegetation Lake Fork right now because the lake dropped, but I will tell you that was year before last, I believe, when we did that survey, and until they dropped the lake, the vegetation was fine in those areas where we found hyacinth. I can vouch for that. I went back and fished those areas after y'all sprayed them, and the spot treatment worked, and we did not kill the other coontail, hydrilla, pondweed, alligator grass, whatever all that grass is. It all stayed in there. Yeah,
that's really our end goal. That's the only reason I brought that up. When I can't say there's never a case where we will not want to remove vegetation, but that's the only situation.
But not all vegetation.
No,
it's just the John Sylvania water hyacinth that can be very problematic. Look at here, I thought that was grass. He's not big enough to feel like a real fish. It's been tough on us this morning, Jake. Look, even he bit it kind of on the corner, almost on the outside there.
They're not fired up.
No, it's a tough day today, but that's all right. We're getting to get across the message, and that's what matters most. Sharing the information, loving our fellow man, and helping each other catch more and bigger fish. That's what really matters.
Yes, sir.
That's what really matters, man. And you know, the managing and restricting and solving of problems is not really all that y'all do by any means. You guys actually do quite a bit of programs to promote the benefit of the fisheries. In fact, you told me a little bit earlier today, y'all got something you're going to do at Fork. What do you got going on there?
Obviously, besides just habitat is really one of my big drives, because I know at the end of the day, habitat's what not only makes anglers have better success, but also keeps populations more abundant. So we were awarded a small grant that's actually through AFCO, and it was applied through our Texas Bass Conservation Director, Dave Terry, actually. And so we were given a grant for a habitat restoration project on Fork. Initially, it was all actually looking at, it was going to be vegetation based. After the drawdown, trying to what we thought would be taking advantage of a bunch of bare banks, and we were going to we were going to broadcast plant 20 plus miles of shoreline.
Well, we don't have any bare banks.
Yeah, I mean, it's
we had some
how quickly
growth sprout up everywhere,
rebounded. Yeah. So we really realized we identified.
So the folks at home understand, if you go to Lake Fork and try to look for a bare bank right now because the lake's 6 foot low,
other than the dam,
you're going to see huge grass and undergrowth, brushy stuff growing along the bank everywhere, and you can't you can't plant anything in there.
No, not at all. So realizing that, we kind of had to call an audible on the fly, and we're going to get several large dump truck loads of riprap, and we actually have a habitat barge with the state now, a big 30-foot pontoon with a dump on the front of it. So we're going to go out there and create a big artificial rock reef on one of the offshore points on the lake, just to, and hopefully this will be the start of something we can build on with future grant and future funding.
There you go.
And just make a...
Yeah, rock's not something that we have a tremendous amount of before, especially not big piles.
No, like exactly. Yeah, we're not talking about just a little pile the size of this boat. We're looking at probably if we have at least 4 dump truck loads for now.
I think we all know the power of a unique piece of structure on a body of water. Absolutely. When you've got a mile-long stretch of grass and then one stretch of rock in the middle of it, where do all the fish tend to go? Yeah. So having a unique rock pile on Fork could be...
Yeah, it could be a really unique spot to help hold some fish, and again, have anglers catch a few more fish on the lake.
And we've had this discussion. I'm going to get the coordinates for about 6 months before they're released to the public. So if you'd like to book a trip, go to yourlakeforkguide.com. Yeah, that we're good. No more invoice.
I feel better.
Folks, these are all jokes.
Yes,
Nobody file any complaints with Texas Parks and Wildlife saying they're being partial to the guides on Fork.
They will be published, I'm sure, the day we put them out. We'll have pictures taken and everything else.
Beautiful. Very good.
I'm excited to see what that does. I think if we put it in the right spot, say kind of on the edge of one of those big long points, that fish set up on top of it, we kind of put it off the edge somewhere. And,
come on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a place that there's a lot of fish caught off of. And again,
how cool would that be to see, like, a really, really big one or something? Yeah, that's one of the things that gets y'all's juices flowing, right? The work that you do, and then seeing people catch big giant, let's say somebody catches a shearlunker, turns it into your program and tells you, hey man, I caught it off
that rock pile.
Your rock pile, Jake. Like, that's really cool.
I'd retire that day probably.
It ain't gonna get that.
But no, and that's something I'm excited to see with this. And if the whole execution goes well, which I expect it to, it'll be something we can replicate and keep adding on to that one throughout that lake, and obviously other lakes in the state now, but this is going to be kind of the start of it.
Beautiful.
And we'll see how it goes. But big thanks to AFCO,
Yes.
BASS, and
Well, and all the people over the years, you know, whether it was Budweiser way back when, or Toyota and AFCO, and I mean, there's so many others that I don't even know about that have
really
sponsored and promoted our programs through Texas Parks and Wildlife. And Texas has become, no doubt about it, the crown jewel of the bass fishing world, really. And every time, you know, you have the top level guys come here, they talk about how, hey, wherever they're from, they need to start paying attention to what Texas is doing. And specifically in y'all's department right here in Athens, Texas, at the Fishery Center. That's where it all kind of headquarters out of and goes down at. And man, you guys have done a phenomenal job. I mean, it's, you know, I literally make a living off the back of y'all's hard work in a lot of ways, and I can't appreciate it enough.
I appreciate the good words folks say, and that's honestly another reason that this keeps motivating me to continue to want to make fishing better in any way we can, because ultimately happy anglers makes my job easier, and it's fulfilling too.
Yeah.
So as always, I appreciate it. And every time you hear, like you mentioned, any of the pros or anybody else come and speak highly of us, we do line up and say it doesn't just make us feel good too.
It was so awesome. I remember when we had the Elite Series here in the fall deal in the COVID year, when they moved everything out to the fall, and they were here in November 2020, and Patrick Walters was running away with it, and at the end he catches like 6-pounder to go over 100 pounds or whatever it was. Right at the end, catches a big 5 or 6 pounder or something, and he literally holds the fish up to the sky. He's just overjoyed in the moment. It's his first win and all that. And what's he say? Thank you, Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Oh, yeah. No,
that was so cool, man.
That was excellent.
That was so cool. And it's true, man. You guys have done the work. So we all benefit from it, and I hope everybody out there understands and appreciates how fortunate we are in the state of Texas with the fishing that we get to take part in because of the work these guys do. So, Jake, thank you, brother.
As always, appreciate it.
I appreciate everything you guys do, and I appreciate today so much. Tell your boss I said thank you for letting you slide out here with me.
I will.
Although I'm sure that didn't bother you too much either.
No, I'm glad we finally got to do this. We've talked about it for a while. So
yeah. Well, let's quit talking.
It's fun to fish.
It's too tough for us to talk and catch them, apparently, so we're going to shut up, and we're going to actually spend the rest of the day trying to catch them. Hey, we appreciate you guys watching so much, as always. Y'all follow along. Is there any websites or anything they can follow to help you guys out, social media or anything?
We've got a few just district Facebook pages, a lot of Texas Parks and Wildlife. Ours is the Tyler District. There's the main one. There's the Texas Freshwater Fishery Center, things like that. We're always
Share Lunker program. You can follow that on Facebook.
We put a lot of information out there. So same, like when our telemetry study is done, we'll put some basic results on there for folks so they can see it.
There you go. Actually go analyze it themselves.
Yeah, all of that. So that's probably the best place to look at it.
Very cool, man. Hey, thank you guys so much for watching, as always. We'll see you next time right here on your Lake Fork Guide.